I'm Linda Laddick.
Who are you? You're Linda
Oops,
Laddick.
this is getting in the way, isn't it?
And so we are today really excited because we're really enjoying this book.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 5 Wealth Secrets 96% of us don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been kind of doing a book study in this, and we are on chapter 3 today. And so that's kind of what we're going through.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
And there's some good stuff in here,
There's
right?
some really good stuff in here.
It's a really, really good book. A lot of kind of revelation things that I'm getting out of it and really enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I'm still catching my breath from running upstairs. I think
just
that's
went to
saying
get water.
something. Tried to get up just in time.
You made it.
I made it. All right. So let's dive in, shall we?
Let's dive in.
All right. So this one
This is number 3.
says Wealth Secret number 3. Invest in multiplication.
Mm-hmm.
Invest in things that multiply.
Yep.
And so like we've been doing here, I'm going to read through a few different, just some of the highlights that I had from this, and we can kind of expand on them a little bit.
Okay.
If any of you are reading this book yet, because we have been talking about it now, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So
Yeah.
feel free to throw those in as we're going through
And how
this.
many are there? There's 5.
5.
So we're only on number 3. You have time to go buy this book
Yeah.
and finish it with us. Finish the last 2 with us.
Yeah. So we're going to do number 4 next week and number 5 the following week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So while the 96 tend to use most or all of their money to purchase things that depreciate, the 4% allocate a significant portion of the money to things that multiply.
So this would be like spending a ton of money on a car that
Mm-hmm.
depreciates immediately and over time, and if you get in an accident and everything else, right?
Yeah, so he says, as a result, the 4% thinkers never borrow for personal consumption or purchase depreciating items on credit. Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's something that I have been thinking about ever since I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the one biggest takeaway I had from that book, was the idea of buying what he called assets. So things that put money in your pocket. Spend your money on as many of those things as possible, and at the same time, reduce the amount of money you're spending on things that are going down in value. And if you do that, even a small percentage of your money on a regular basis, like you start building your net worth, you start moving forward financially. And so that is a really, really powerful principle. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of, I don't know, should we go into this section here?
Yeah, I think this
Right
is...
here, this.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to read this part?
Yeah, it's pretty long, but it is good.
Okay.
All right. So he says, I saw something very ironic just last weekend in a meeting held at our congregation. Bill, who loves God with all his heart, as I do, wore a T-shirt to the meeting with the words written, "One Master." Of course, the master to which he was referring was Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was remembering the teacher you gave me when I was 10 years old when you showed me a Bible verse from Proverbs 22:7. It said, you asked me the question whether I wanted to grow up to rich or poor, or a slave or a master. You taught me that this verse tells that the borrower is servant to the master. And I thought this was so ironic that Bill would wear this T-shirt declaring that he has one master, when I know for a fact he's borrowed a lot of money from various credit cards and finance companies, and thus in reality is a servant to many masters. One of his masters is so bold that they even put their name on the card. They call it MasterCard. Pretty funny. And so he goes on to say, if God personally appeared in physical form in our church and asked us as a congregation to participate financially in a missions project, most people couldn't do so, whether they wanted to or not. 100% of their monthly cash flow is already allocated to their debt obligations. So in reality, they can't obey the master because they have many other masters who must be satisfied first.
That one got me. I think... So we don't have debt, but it still got me because I feel
we've
like
been there.
We've been there, and
That was a lot of our motivation for getting out of debt.
yeah. And I feel like this is something a little bit easier for you because you are the one that has driven most of this. And so that really convicted me to my core. Like, even though I'm not in any debt, I feel like there was a heart issue that needed to be tweaked. Mm-hmm. Just in reading that, like thinking about, am I okay? Who is my master, and am I treating the master that way?
Yeah, but yeah,
it got me.
I remember just that desire to to want to be out of debt just because we were paying hundreds of dollars a month to the credit card companies for interest charges.
Yeah.
Not even just what we borrowed, but interest charges to them. And I remember having that revelation of, if we just pay off this debt, we can instantly transfer hundreds of dollars that we're spending on interest charges over to these organizations that we want to give to.
Yeah.
And we'll feel no different. Like, our lifestyle will be exactly the same, but we'll just change the money going from to a bank that I don't care about to, these charities or missions or whoever that we really are passionate about, that we want to support.
Yeah.
And that was a big motivator for me. It's like, yes, I love the financial freedom. I love not having any debt, not feeling that burden, but just not being enslaved to whatever.
Anyone else.
Some of these banks or financially companies, like, that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting as a God-fearing believer, if you are in debt, like, what does it look like if God does appear in front of you and ask you to give to someone? Like, the question that I would ask is, can I trust God enough to take care of these debts and give to what he's asking me to give to?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is super challenging, because if God was asking you to do that, I would think he would cover the other things. But I mean, I think this is a different and much more difficult and theological question than.
Yeah, I think the point is that there is a wisdom component to managing your money. Like, there's no doubt that God can provide in any kind of circumstances. Like, we see that throughout the Bible, whenever, the Israelites with the manna, and like just many other instances, like Jesus pulling the coin out of the fish's mouth and stuff. Like, God will provide in crazy ways for us. Like, there's no doubt about that. But there's also no doubt that there's a wisdom component here that is just part of biblical money management. It's a way that he designed and what he created. And
Yeah.
So I just want to always grow in that and grow in wisdom in that way, and just be more and more wise with what he's given, and be as good a steward as we possibly can.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so I'm going to continue here. So, for anybody who is just not caught up on this book, the idea is that 96% of us don't know these wealth secrets, and 4% of us do. And also throughout here, he's kind of telling a story, and so if it sounds like there's anyway,
Yeah,
you
he's
get the
using a
point.
father teaching a son about
To kind of teach some of these
money
principles.
management. Yeah.
All right, so it says, lending, continued Papa, multiplies the value of your money. Borrowing depletes the value of your money. While borrowing is not categorically wrong, the cost of borrowing, namely the interest, must always be significantly less than the value created through the investment. It may be wise to borrow to capitalize a business or to invest in a property or an asset that multiplies in value at a much greater rate than the cost of interest. However, the 96% frequently are willing to pay interest through borrowing to invest in something that not only doesn't increase in value at all, but also depreciates in value over the course of their loan. So it sounds like this is what several of your friends have done.
Can you break that down? Because that is a little bit confusing.
Meaty. Yeah. So the point here is that the 96 will borrow for a car. He's saying that the 4% will not.
Or for clothes.
Because a car,
to get your eyelashes done.
A couch, whatever, furniture on your house, anything like this that is just going to go down in value. So your car, we all know this, cars depreciate really fast. As soon as you drive it off the lot, you've just driven $1,000 off the lot, or $2,000, So that's just normal. We know that, we understand that. And most other things that most people buy tend to be depreciating assets. So if this is food, you eat it, it's gone. There's no value there, obviously. On the other hand, real estate is something that generally at least holds its value and often increases in value. And so that would be an asset that is more likely to appreciate. So I think, according to what he's saying, that's kind of like the bare minimum of what you want to do. But ideally, you're investing in something that's going to increase at a much better rate. So that would be a business, or that would be an investment property or something like that. So that's what I'm getting out of all this. All right, let's go to this next session here. So this is from Exodus 36:5. And so this is an interesting passage, which I remember reading this and just being like, wow, that is crazy. So I'll just read it to you. So And then they said to Moses, the people are bringing much more than enough for the construction work which the Lord commanded. So Moses issued a command, and a proclamation was circulated throughout the camp saying, let no man or woman any longer perform work for the contributions of the sanctuary. Thus the people were restrained from bringing any more. Like, that's pretty crazy. And so then he goes on to say, Isaac, when have you ever heard your pastor in the congregation tell people to stop giving because they've already brought more than enough? I've never heard that.
No.
I've never heard anything even close to that.
No.
And I'm curious if any of you have. Let us know in the comments
Yeah.
if you heard that at your church. But I think we all know that that is not how it typically goes. So he goes on to say that... I'll just read this section here. That's exactly what happened to ancient Israel. I was wondering how they were able to do that in that day, and we're not able to even come close to that in our day. So I was asking myself, what's the difference then? Were the people more generous, or did they have more research or resources? And then it dawned on me that the difference was that the people in that time, had no debt, and thus they were in control of 100% of their own resources. They only had one master, which was God. Today, most people are in great debt and have given control of the resources to many masters. And most people are not able to be directed by God in their finances, even if they want to be, because they've already delegated authority over the resources and become slaves to their multiple masters. It's like, that is really interesting.
I know.
And I just wonder what that means in this whole equation, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa and Aisha are like, no way.
No way is it never hearing that
Never,
from your
they've
church.
never
Yeah.
heard that from
Yeah.
church. I mean, Aisha says that she has heard of a goal being met, which I've heard that too. But and that's really exciting. That's amazing that they're like, quit giving. Go give towards something else. I mean, that's really exciting to think about.
So, all right. So here's something that this is really interesting, I think, theory that he has here. I've never read this in the Bible, so I think this is a theory. So he says, well, then, I don't know if it happened exactly this way or not, but I believe that about 100 years ago, there was a global strategy conference in hell. Satan gathered all the demons and announced that he was looking for a new strategy by which he could enslave nations and generations to himself. The spirit of mammon, this is in Matthew 6:24, if anybody wants to read more about it. The spirit of mammon raised his hand and stated that he had a plan. Mammon began, I think we can use a principle I learned from the Bible. Proverbs 22:7 says that the borrower is slave to the lender. We already have many institutions and individuals that we control from hell. They are completely dedicated to serve me, and I control them through their love of money. So we will begin to use these institutions and people to make money available to borrow at interest. Others who then borrow the money become slaves of the lenders whom we control. And he just kind of goes on here in this conversation with this whole thing. And so basically Satan says, well, how are we going to force them to do that? And he says, well, we don't need to at all. And he's like, well, there's no way they're going to fall for that. There's no way the Christians are going to fall for this. And he said, maybe not many at first, but we'll continue to deceive people and they'll get accustomed to the idea. And at first, we'll only have a few who will borrow, but after a few short decades, I think most of the entire society will be acclimated to the idea of debt, and most people will borrow and become our slaves. It's like that.
And it's so
is
true.
Interesting. Because
so true.
if you
I mean,
just
I
go
was
back
raised in a Christian household, and I didn't know that it was possible to not have debt.
Yeah.
Like, at least on your car and your home, right? And maybe if you're lucky, you'll pay off your car, you know. And my parents weren't extravagant people by any means. I think that's what's so interesting about this is like,
it's just crazy
how did we go
fast-
from nobody having any debt really
Yeah, the first
to
credit card was introduced like in the, 50s or 60s. And when it first came out, like that was you need to borrow. Like you were looked down upon for using a credit card.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And now
I mean,
everybody uses it.
and it's just, and it's a status symbol to have like the black card or whatever, like some of these really prestigious cards. And it's just crazy. It's crazy how fast it changed, you know? And I think that's really interesting. Just the idea that this could have been a ploy of the enemy the entire time, you know? Anyway. All
What
right.
else you got?
Let's come over to this other section here. So the 96% tend to focus on what they don't have, and the 4% tend to focus on what they do have. The 4% many times expect God's supernatural multiplication of a very small initial amount. So, for
Yeah.
example, in the story you mentioned, which I think we'll get to in a second, I think this is feeding the 5,000, Jesus feeding the 5,000.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Jesus' disciples were baffled as to how they might feed several thousand people. Unfortunately, they were focused on what they did not have. Jesus asked his disciples to feed the people, and they immediately began to tell Jesus that they didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough money, and even if they did, there was no town nearby with which they could buy food. And so that's really interesting. So Jesus says, hey, do this, and they're telling them all the reasons that we can't do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like, how many times am I doing that?
Oh, yeah, me too.
To the Lord when I feel like he's
For
leading me
sure.
something. I'm like, well,
Right.
no, God, I don't think you know. Like, I think you're missing something. Anyway, he goes on to say, finally, one follower, Andrew, changed his focus from what they didn't have to what they did have. And my paraphrase of what he said is this: one little boy here has his own personal lunch of 5 bread rolls and 2 fish, and he's willing to donate. I don't know what good that'll do among so many, but that is what we have. Jesus then took that personal lunch and released God's supernatural multiplication such that 5,000 men and their families were fed from that one personal lunch. So he said, Isaac, the point is this: God can naturally or supernaturally multiply by huge factors such as 100, 1,000, or even 10,000. However, even 10,000 times 0 is still 0. A person who continues to focus on and present to God what he does not have, or in other words, 0, will never experience God's multiplication. So this is another secret of the 4%. They always focus on what they have and expect it to multiply, even if it's a small amount. The 96% tend to focus on what they do not have and what they can't do, and as a result, they experience no multiplication.
Yeah. I think this would be another parallel for this could be with your time. It's like we are in a busy season, no doubt, and a challenging season. And by the end of the day, we're like beat. You're seeing us right now. We are beat.
We're hanging in there, though.
Yeah, we're hanging in there. But it's like we could easily say we have no time to work.
Yeah.
But here we are. We put our kids to bed about an hour ago, and we're making it happen. We're like, we do have this little time, and we don't, we're not ready to do this every night, but we can do this once a week, right? So that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I do feel like we have multiplied our efforts by just using the little time that we have.
Yeah, but we've noticed this financially. Like, we've had instances of this.
For sure.
Like, I'm thinking back to, it's similar enough thing, but that time where we were wanting to tithe, like we had been tithing for a while, and I messed up some math somewhere along the line after getting a raise at some point or something, and I finally figured out, we're actually not giving 10%, and we wanted to be given 10%. And we didn't have enough money in the natural to do it, but we decided to give what we did have to do that, even though it didn't make sense numbers-wise. Yeah. And then, like, immediately, the next day, we saw the provision show up. Like, and it's just so cool when that happens,
Yeah.
And, I just feel like we've seen that over and over again. And, another instance from the Bible where he talks about this is in 2 Kings 4, chapter 4. And this is with the widow and Elijah.
Right.
And, I'll just read this section. So, her husband had borrowed money and thereby made himself a servant to his creditors until the debt was paid. Unfortunately, the man died and left his family to face the creditors. When the creditors came to collect, they demanded to take the widow's 2 sons as literal slaves for payment for that debt. The woman cried out to Elisha the prophet, and the prophet immediately asked her, "What do you have in the house?" The woman said, "I have nothing in the house except a jar of oil." I have nothing except this one thing.
Right.
Again, we see the woman is focused on what she does not have. Elisha didn't ask her what she didn't have. He asked her what she did have. And even when she told him, she had completely discounted this one jar of oil because it was she thought insufficient. And this is how the 96 always think. They don't understand or expect natural or supernatural multiplication. However, the 4%, of which Elijah was one, focus on what is available and expect multiplication. And for anybody who doesn't know, I'll just continue the story a little bit. So Elisha then instructed the woman to borrow as many jars as she could and begin to pour the oil from one jar into the other jars. And upon doing so, the woman found that God supernaturally multiplied the oil to fill all the jars that she had.
Told you we're beat.
Yeah. Elisha then instructed the woman to sell the multiplied oil and to use the money to pay her husband's debt, and then have sufficient left over for her family to live on for some time. Yeah, and it's just so good.
That's amazing. I mean, that is loaves and fishes type of miracle right there.
Same thing. But I just love that. I love just looking at what's in your hand. And this is really part of why we named our site SeedTime. You know, it's this idea of you have this tiny little seed and the potential that's there. If it's all you have is this one seed, like there's just so much power in that. And that's one of the beautiful things I think about God, the way God's creation works, you know, and especially like plants, like all the power, like there's endless power and potential wrapped up in one seed. I literally just wrote this article actually wrote it a while ago, just published it a couple weeks ago, about how you can feed the entire world from a single apple. And I went and did the math on this whole thing. And basically an apple has, I think average apple is like 5 to 7 seeds or something like that. And so if you multiply this out, you take one apple, you take those seeds and plant them, and then in about 5 or 7 years, they start bearing fruit, and then each one of those have seeds. So you just multiply this thing out. If you do this, take that one apple tree, plant them, and just continue to plant every single seed that you get, within 40 years, you literally can feed the entire world from that one apple seed. So you can read it for all the numbers to kind of see it. It's absolutely amazing. But that's the point, is that God wraps all this potential up in a seed. And it's that same idea that you can take something that's really small, seemingly insignificant, and expect God to multiply it, and we can see him do some really awesome things.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about, this is another interesting point that I want to highlight in here. Where does it start? Okay, so he's reading Matthew 5:5 here. He said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." I always thought meekness was just another word for humility, but I've since learned that humility is an attitude, while meekness is an action. Humility is who I am, while meekness is what I do. I further learned from the Bible dictionary that meekness is a fruit of power. The dictionary states that Jesus was meek not because he was impotent, but rather because he voluntarily limited himself to use only a small percentage of his available power. So I've come to define meekness this way. Meekness is voluntary limiting of the use of available resources or power. A meek person is one who has great power or resources, but voluntarily limits oneself to use only a percentage of those resources. So something I realized as I thought about this was the fact that meekness and debt are then opposites. If meekness is having margin, then the opposite of that is having negative margins. So meekness is having a certain capacity and voluntarily using less than 100%.
So interesting.
So that is a really interesting way of looking at it that I've never really thought of. And I never really understood meekness, I don't think, either. But,
yeah, me either.
But that idea, that's one of the, I'm working on a book right now, and that's one of the things that I'm writing about in this one chapter, is just this idea of never spend 100% of your money. You know, like just always, we're going to, for our anniversary in a couple of days, we're going to rent this Tesla, and it's like the fastest Tesla that they make. And I'm really excited because I haven't gotten to drive a lot of fast cars, and I'm kind of excited to drive this one. I'm not going to drive 200 miles an hour, I promise. But the point is that you can have a really fast car, and you don't have to show off. You don't have to drive at 200 miles an hour to prove that power is there.
Right.
If I pull up at a stoplight next to someone who knows about this car, like they're not even going to try to race me in this car because they know the power is there. And
unless they just want to see it.
Well, maybe, but that's a different point. But we aren't going to do that. We're going to stay safe.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, and the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah.
I just looked it up. I'm like, it says that, right? But
Yeah.
it's in Matthew 5:5 in the
Yeah.
Beatitudes.
All right. So summing this kind of chapter up, he says secret number 3 is invest in things that multiply. Never borrow money to purchase a depreciating asset or to invest in something that doesn't increase the value of the asset or cash flow significantly more than the cost of interest you must pay to borrow the money. So summing all that up, don't buy things on credit that go down in value. And so this is where,
Yeah.
in general, credit cards, and I think we all know this. This isn't like a brand new revelation for most of us, but I think it's a good reminder for us and a little bit more additional motivation to fight to get those credit cards paid off, to fight to get the car loans paid off, to fight to break out of the car loan cycle. That was something that I think was a huge part of our financial progress.
Yeah.
Like breaking out of the mindset of I just always have to have a car payment. Like that's the way it always has to be. And getting it paid off and then just continue contributing that whatever, $200-$300 a month instead of to the lender, now to your savings account, build up a savings so
Yeah.
you can at least have a big down payment and possibly buy the next one with cash. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this meekness thing in there is like because of the way debt works now, like you can take a significant size loan to buy a new car or to buy a house or whatever the thing may be. Doesn't mean you should take that entire
Yeah.
thing, right? So, I mean, one of the things that we did was after we were married, we had paid off our debt. You bought your sister's car for $1,000, and you told me this is an insurance policy. Not to say that we didn't have car
yeah.
insurance.
So
but
just adding a little bit more color to that story.
Yeah,
real
go
quick.
ahead.
So we had 2 older cars.
yeah,
And she was trading her car into the dealership, and they were going to give her $1,000 for it. I knew it was a good car. It was an old car, but it was a good car that had been really well taken care of. I'm like, no.
you pointed at me like it was me.
Yeah, it was my sister.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so I'm like, no, you're not going to trade it in. I'm going to buy it off you for $1,000. I'll give you the money. And we just bought it as a backup third car, knowing that one of our other older cars might go soon. And I didn't want to be in a position where if that other car went out, that we'd have to go buy a new car because it's hard to find a good car for $1,000. But I knew this was one, so that's why we did that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we bought this car as our, backup and our insurance policy. And
Well, you kind of thought it was silly.
I was like, seriously, we were going to spend $1,000 on this. Like, I've got plans for $1,000. Like,
I got a shopping spree.
I do not want to
my
spend
name on it.
$1,000 on a car, on a third car when there's just 2 of us, But sure enough, your car died soon after that. And
I drove that car for, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, you drove it for a while. But, yeah, it's like, this was what was it, a 95 Taurus?
Old Taurus. That old bubbly
And
one.
This was probably
It's
in
not the best looking car on the road.
2008, 2009,
Yeah, it's
somewhere in
pretty
there.
old. Yeah.
So, yeah, was it the coolest thing? No. Okay, we like things to be cool, okay? We're cool people. But it was not cool. But it was so worth it to be in the position where we paid for our next car with cash.
Yeah, we
Our
never.
next several cars.
We never borrowed for a car again after
Yeah.
that, right?
And it was
Everyone spent
like
cash.
driving around that car for a few years. And really, it was kind of our second car because we had the Fit by
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
was
so we didn't have to drive it that often. But anyway, point is that was one little thing that led us considerably forward, pushed us considerably forward
Yeah.
down the path of towards financial freedom. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And that very much, I think, tying to the meekness component, I think that was one of our, I think, better examples of that. We got plenty we could tell you of not doing that, but that one,
For sure.
yeah, I think I'm lined up a little bit. Mm-hmm. All right.
There's actually a part 2 to this wealth secret
Mm-hmm.
that we're doing that next week.
I don't know. I think we'll probably move on to,
to
secret
number
number
4.
4. I think
Okay.
we might touch on this. It's mostly about entrepreneurship, and so I don't know.
This book is really good, though. Like, I highly recommend it. Or you can just listen to our highlights, because Bob really is reading you most of the highlights from the chapter. But it's really good. So yeah, okay.
All right, so let's check out some of these comments.
The bubbly one, yes, that Taurus.
Yep,
You know
the bubbly
exactly
one.
what we're talking about. Okay, let me see. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Aisha. I'm not out of debt yet, but working on it. People get mad at me because I'm working on it, and they ask me, wouldn't you rather have a life?
Ah,
You're like, oh, just you wait. I'm going to have a great life.
and that reminds me
And
of Dave's quote, live like no one else now so you can live like no one else later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you still have a great life, right? I'm sure you do. But I get that, where you're like making some sacrifices. But you can just tell them, well, you are working towards a goal.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you have a goal, and meeting your goal is really fun. And
just to be
working towards it
clear,
is
like
fun.
we've made a good number of sacrifices over the years, but we've also, I feel like we've had a very enjoyable life.
Very enjoyable,
Like I don't
yeah.
feel like we had to sacrifice very much. And so, yeah, me
Could we
not
always
having
want more? Absolutely. That
Yeah.
list never ends. But
the eyes of a
that's-
man are
yeah.
never satisfied. Like it's always going to be there. Like, and so for me, giving up having a newer car and driving an old Taurus for a few years, like, I mean, come on, that's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
You know, like that type of sacrifice, I just feel like that's kind of silly. That's just like, first world stuff for me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it might be different for other people. And you might be in a job where, driving a 13-year-old car, whatever. I don't know if you're a real estate agent or something, maybe that doesn't work. But the point is, in our situation for us, that wasn't that big of a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And we've had some other sacrifices, but there's just been a lot that we've been able to do in the midst of all of it. And I don't look back and be like, man, we had 5 years that were just miserable. I just see like, I don't know. We moved
yeah.
forward financially and
I see God's
didn't have to
faithfulness
give
in
up
it all.
that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that's the other thing is like getting out of debt is a lofty and biblical goal. And, we've seen this with readers and with viewers and emails we get like over and over and over again. There is this thing where it's so clear to me that God wants us to be out of debt so that when we get in alignment with that and when we prayerfully step into it and say, God, I want to do this. Can you help me? Like he comes flooding in with so much support, moving you forward so much
true.
faster. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, I did my math. I planned on getting out of debt. It was going to take 5 years. And we prayed and asked God for help. And 2 years later, we had all the debt paid off. Like I've heard that over and over and over and over
Yeah.
again. I can't even tell you how many times.
It's so
and
true.
that's the thing. Bring the Lord into it. It's his desire. It's his will for you.
Yeah.
And
Take
that's a
some steps
game changer.
forward.
That's a game changer.
Right. We drink out of canning jars too.
Ding.
It's awesome. Let's see. Paid off our car, drove it for 17 years, then gave it away. We've been carless
Nice.
for 4 years. May, where do you live that you can be carless? That's amazing. It irks me when you're in a retail store and they push and push for you to get their credit card. I know. But sometimes I'm like, man, that extra 10%. Doesn't it get you sometimes? But then I'm like, no. I don't need that. I don't need it.
Yeah. Mesa reminds me of the book Millionaire Next Door. That is another great book that I recommend. Basically highlighting the idea that society's impression of what a millionaire is all wrong. Like we tend to think of millionaires as like the rap videos where they got all the money they're throwing up in the air. They got all these gold chains on and stuff. And the reality is that most millionaires don't flaunt it, and you wouldn't even know. Hence the name, The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
So it's a great book.
So frustrated the book is only available at a reasonable price as an ebook. This is the kind of book you need to have in hand. I mean,
Yeah, I think the Kindle version is only $10. I don't know what the paperback is, but yeah. So
surprised
I will
that-
just say this because I think I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. Education is one of the best investments that you can make, and so I know sometimes it seems like a book or a course or whatever the thing may be, some training is expensive.
so true.
But try to view it as, what is this going to do for me for the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I can change my mindset here, is that worth more than a couple Starbucks?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like try to frame it against where you might otherwise spend that money. I'm not at all saying that whatever, I don't know if it's 20 or $25 right now. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that that's an easy thing for everybody at any given point. But I would ask yourself that question about any kind of education. Like most of us have no problem spending whatever $10 or $15 on Netflix or Hulu each month, or even going to the theater with a family and spending whatever $30 or something. So
if you take your family to the theater,
well, I don't know how
theater.
big. Theater.
I think
Anyway.
you're spending more than $30.
Yeah. Anyway, point is that we tend to be really liberal when it comes to entertainment.
We actually have a budget
But-
category for education.
Yeah.
You said entertainment, but
Yeah,
you meant.
I'm talking about. We're really liberal about
Oh.
entertainment, but a little more tight-fisted on education. And I don't know, more that has impacted my life positively in terms of business or finance than the Bible and other
Yeah.
books that I've read, or
Yeah.
classes I've taken. Like that's the stuff that's really changed a lot. So anyway, that's a little bit of encouragement for anybody who needs a little more incentive to spend money on stuff that will help them grow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's encouraging to hear you say that the time wasn't miserable. I need that encouragement, Lisa. I know you do. Weren't we talking about doing a course or something that was like paying down debt without living like a pauper or something like
Yeah.
that? Ways to save money without living like a
yeah.
pauper.
No, I mean that's honestly in general our thing. Like all of our content. I don't know how much of our stuff you've seen, but any of the videos I make, like I don't make videos with money saving tips of, rinsing out your Ziploc bags to save 3 cents. And it's like, and I don't have a problem with anyone doing that.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with
If
that,
you're
but
like
that's
in
not,
that habit and you don't care,
that's
do it.
not how I'm just much more interested in big wins. I'm interested in the things that take less time and yield bigger results.
And they can actually help you enjoy life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's,
Because
so
that's a huge piece of it.
anyway, I absolutely don't think, I think there's a balance point here. And I think there is a way that you can do this and you can do it with God and you can move forward a whole lot faster than you think. And I think part of that is looking at what's in your hand and that multiplication factor that he's talking about right here. Yeah. Because I think that was the biggest thing. Like when paying down debt, like that's another area where I felt like we noticed this. Because it felt like, all right, God, I only have $100 a month to pay towards this debt, but I'm going to do it. Like rather than just say, I'm never going to get it done, and so why even try? Like I'm going to take the $100 that I have,
It's like
and
the
I'm going to
Shawshank
trust.
Redemption.
Yeah, I'm going to trust and expect that you're going to multiply it and that you're going to turn it into something,
Yeah.
and that you're going to make it go faster. And like I said, we saw that in our life. Things just moved so much faster than I thought, and we've seen that over and over and over again.
Yeah, just keep chipping away.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, that is all for tonight. Thank you for coming to hang out with us. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this. If you're listening to the podcast, we are recording these every Tuesday night live on YouTube. You can just go to seedtime.com/live, and that'll take you directly to the page, and you can join us 8 p.m. Central Time every Tuesday night.
Time.
And if you're listening to it on iTunes or something, you can leave us a review there because that's super helpful for us, getting this in front of more people and reaching more people with this message. So, but thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for listening. Be blessed. Be a blessing.
Yeah.
And we'll see you soon.
Goodbye. Oh, you gotta go turn that
I got to
off.
go turn it off, don't I? All right.
Watch this, you guys.
I got to jump over here.